Hi, everybody. Welcome to Unit 4. We are halfway through the course, which is crazy. This unit is on the expanded core curriculum, which is one of my nerdish TVI favorites. I want to apologize. It's kind of dark in here, but it's about the best I can do right now. So I'm going to take you through a little bit as an introduction to the expanded core curriculum for this week. And I just wanted to say a couple of things before we start. So one thing is that we get a lot of questions about the assignments, that you need the details, some folks, and I just want to let you know the syllabus actually has all the details in it. So it's fine to ask us questions, but just so you know, for your own reference, it might be easier for you and less stressful, if you just check the syllabus and then in the assignment, it gives you the details. Of course, if there's any other questions, please feel free to ask them, but I just wanted to let you know that that's where all of that information lives. The other thing is that I apologize. I messed up on the foundations reading last week. I had some confusion about which volume you have of the purple book. There's 2 of them, and I think most of you actually have both. But the chapter I did want you to read was on early childhood, but it's fine if you read another chapter as well, because you most likely will be reading all of the chapters in your program. So now you're ahead of the game. Just want to start off with a little bit about the ECC. So I wrote for students with visual impairments and additional disabilities with a question mark because sometimes folks don't really quite understand the importance of the ECC for students with additional disabilities, and it's as complex as the ECC is for students with visual impairments and no other disabilities. The expanded curriculum for students with additional disabilities is sort of even more challenging to wrap your head around and to be able to collaborate with other practitioners for. So I wanted to stress that and give you some information on that as well. Everything in the ECC can be applied and should be applied to students with additional disabilities, but it's something that I will be honest with you, you learn a lot on the job about kind of how to do that and how it works. So I wanted to give you some resources for that. Also, just want to say in this unit, there's a lot of great information on the ECC. Please make sure to look at all the web resources. I also have an IRIS module, which is from Vanderbilt University, and that's like a little learning model with some exercises you can do and things to read about a TVI and an O&M and collaboration. And I put that in there because collaboration is one of the most important things in our field. You'll learn more about it in your courses as you go on. But if you're working in special ed or have already, you understand how important collaboration is for your students. And for our students with visual impairments, it's no different. And so I just want you to get a little bit of a taste for that because it really, doing the ECC with our students really does, you have to include other people. You have to collaborate. You have to help them to understand your students' needs. So I think that is a part of the ECC, which is why I put it in there. So if we think about the expanded core curriculum, well, what is it? Well, it's everything in addition to the current curriculum, or it's everything that students need to access the existing curriculum. So just as a refresher, what is the existing curriculum? Well, it's math and science. It's STEM learning, so learning and technology. It's English language arts and language learning of other languages, Spanish, French, whatever, Mandarin. It's fine arts and social studies, it's economics, business education, and it's also vocational education. And actually, I forgot to put in there physical education, which is a really important one. Sorry, I left it out. So the expanded core curriculum, or ECC as we call it, is compensatory or functional academic skills, including communication modes. So when we look at students who are learning the compensatory skill, is part of making sure that a blind student has access to literacy, to what they need in the classroom. Orientation and mobility is, of course, safe and independent travel for our students. And some of you are training as O&Ms in school, so you could probably share a little bit more about that with us. But orientation and mobility is really what a blind person or an individual with a visual impairment needs to be able to navigate the environment safely and eventually independently. O&Ms are extremely important to the work that we do and for our students. Social interaction skills. So sometimes students with visual impairments, or a lot of times students with visual impairments really need help in this area because social learning is incidental, so we have access to people's faces and their hand gestures and what they're doing, and folks without vision or limited vision do not have that same opportunity. So those type of things need to be learned, they need to be taught, and there's nothing within the regular curriculum that addresses that, but it is a large part of the picture. So think about your own experience fitting in at school, even now in higher ed. How do your social experiences sort of help you to make your way in your academics? How do they help you to get what you need? How do they help you to have good experiences? Sometimes they can lend themselves to negative experiences. So that's really a really important. Social interaction skills are huge. Recreation and leisure skills. So those are skills like physical education where, a student might need something adapted. They might need a basketball that you can hear as opposed to one that does not have any sound with it. So some of the things are really simple and basic, but really important. Think about career education. So our students need vocational help just like anyone else, but they need adaptations and modifications to be able to achieve the skills necessary when they transition to get a job, to live on their own, all that kind of stuff. Career education is huge, and that goes along with that. So the use of assistive technology, this is huge for our students. And one of the things about assistive technology is that it's extremely dynamic, and that's actually one of the things that I know myself I had a really hard time keeping up on as a teacher of the visually impaired. So if you're a teacher of the visually impaired, you really have to understand if my student needs Braille, what's the best Braille product to get them? What's the best technology? If they're using, a computer, if they're using a tablet, how do I go in there and modify what they need so that they can see the screen if they're low vision, or so that they can read their Braille display, that kind of stuff. So assistive technology is huge, far too big to go into here. Otherwise, I would take all the time. Sensory efficiency skills. So really understanding what the other senses that students have, how can we make the most of those? How can they use those to navigate the environment, to see text, if possible, in large print, that kind of stuff. So really helping them to use their other senses as much as they can to not necessarily compensate for their vision loss, but to really just work for them in a way where, like, it's not replacing, but you're kind of looking at the whole child and you're saying, okay, I'm going to do all that I can so that this kid understands how they can use their hearing, how they can use their sense of smell, how can they can use all of the sensory information that they have to gather the best picture and most comprehensive picture possible of the environment and of the materials. Self-determination. Self-determination is important for all children with disability or with IEPs, but this is really sort of understanding your abilities and your limitations. It's about being confident in your work. It's about, it kind of is sort of a wrap-up of all of the other skills of the ECC, because when it comes down to it, you need self-determination to kind of transition successfully, to move on in life, to be responsible for yourself and your own life and really live as independently as possible, which is what we want for our students. So that's self-determination is a big one, and there's actually a lot of work done in self-determination for students with disabilities, which is kind of nice. So I just wanted to point out, I put a little slide up here that says, whoa, because you can see all of the existing curriculum on the left, and on the right is all of the expanded core curriculum. And so both of these are hugely important, and we need to be able to integrate what's on the right into what's on the left and make everything accessible for our students. And that sounds overwhelming right now, but we're going to give you the tools as much as we can to get through it. And again, you collaborate with all of the other practitioners that you work with the child, and that's really what lends itself to this being something that's possible to do for our students. So I just want to talk a little bit about the ECC for students with additional disabilities. So all of them are appropriate and should be addressed for students with visual impairments. That's really kind of the law. That's what special education states, is these children need to be educated to the fullest extent possible, and the ECC is part of how that happens, basically. But many students will require adaptations and modifications. So, running track during PE might not be reasonable or make sense for your student, but how can that activity be adapted so that your student can be included? So think just as an example, a simple example. But students will require adaptations and modifications. And I wrote think bigger with an exclamation point, because a lot of times we can kind of get focused on the small picture and the details, but when it comes down to it, there is most likely, I would say 9 times out of 10, there's a way for you to adapt the activity to make it accessible for your student. It might not even be the whole activity, but if you get the nuts and bolts of it, you will probably be able to do with really good resources and with a really good foundational knowledge of the materials available to you, how you can sort of, the goals that you create for the child and the child's abilities and their challenges as well. So all of those things need to be considered, but it can really be done. Communication is key. It's access, and for students with multiple impairments, communication is really what literacy is. So it's really that functional academic compensatory or functional academic part of the ECC, those compensatory skills, because that includes communication modes, and communication modes is really what comes in for students with literacy. Literacy is communication for many of these students. We figure out how to present things to them, maybe in their best field where they can see best, and then we play around with different ways that they can communicate, whether it be augmented communication, if it's pictures, if it's not pictures, if it's sounds, how is it that we do it with them? So that's really important. And then also that just the teacher, the visually impaired, and the O&M provide support in all of the areas. So again, that's that collaboration piece, and it's even more, and it's just as important for our children with multiple disabilities as it is for those without. Okay, so wrapping up, sorry that went a little long. We've got a Zoom conference meeting on September 13th, and that is from 6 to 7, and that is going to be 5 to 6 Pacific time, and I know some of you guys might be in different time zones because there's a few of you from all over the place, so please just be mindful of that and check the time zone. That always messes me up in classes, so I always have to double check. So during that meeting, we're just going to go over kind of, what we've done so far. I'm looking for a little bit of information about your project so far, what's been challenging, what's been easy, what have you gotten out of it, that kind of stuff. I just want to be able to share kind of where we've been so far and where we're headed. And be sure to be reading your plan of the blind text, because that is due on September 23rd. All right, thanks so much, guys. Have a great week, and I'll see you Thursday.